Symptoms start with a fever over 104 degrees Fahrenheit, chills, headache, or body aches within a week. The patient has a dry cough, which might progress to shortness of breath. In 10% to 20% of cases, patients require mechanical ventilation to breathe. About 3.5% die from the disease. Symptoms generally begin in 2 to 7 days, but some reports suggest it might take as long as 10 days. Scientists are close to developing a lab test to diagnose SARS. In the meantime, it is diagnosed by its symptoms. There is no evidence that antibiotics or antiviral medicines help, so doctors can offer only supportive care. Patients with SARS are kept in isolation to reduce the risk of transmission. Scientists aren't sure yet, but some researchers think it's a newly discovered coronavirus, the family of viruses that cause some common colds. You may well ask why science did not warn us of global warming sooner. I think that there are several reasons. We were from the 1970s until the end of the century distracted by the important global problem of stratospheric ozone depletion, which we knew was manageable. We threw all our efforts into it and succeeded, but had little time to spend on climate change. Climate science was also neglected because 20th century science failed to recognize the true nature of Earth as a responsive self-regulating entity. Biologists were so carried away by Darwin's great vision that they failed to see that living things were tightly coupled to their material environment, and that evolution concerns the whole Earth system with living organisms an integral part of it. Impressionism was a 19th-century art movement that began as a loose association of Paris-based artists who started publicly exhibiting their art in the 1860s. Characteristics of Impressionist painting include visible brush strokes, light colors, open composition, emphasis on light in its changing qualities, often accentuating the effects of the passage of time, ordinary subject matter, and unusual visual angles. The name of the movement is derived from Claude Monet's impression sunrise impression Soleil Levant. Critic Louis Leroy inadvertently coined the term in a satiric review published in Le Charivari. Many people today think of culture in the way that it was thought of in Europe during the 18th and early 19th centuries. This concept of culture reflected inequalities within European societies and their colonies around the world. This understanding of culture equates culture with civilization and contrasts both with nature or non-civilization. According to this understanding of culture, some countries are more civilized than others, and some people are more cultured than others. Theorists like Matthew Arnold (1822–1888) believe that culture is simply that which is created by the best that has been got and said in the world. p6. Anything that doesn't fit into this category is labeled as chaos or anarchy. From this perspective, culture is closely tied to cultivation, which is the progressive refinement of human. In Australia, the early years of children's education is the responsibility of many government and non-government agencies, and it occurs in a range of settings. Preschool is aimed at children around 4 years of age to prepare them for compulsory schooling from the age of 6 years. In most states and territories, children can start full-time schooling at 5 years of age when they enroll in a kindergarten or preparatory year. In 2001, just over half of 5-year-olds, 57%, were at school, with about a third, 34%, attending preschool. While in some states and territories children can commence preschool before they turn 4, participation rates for 3-year-olds are much lower than 4-year-olds, 24% compared with 56% for 4-year-olds in 2001. Measuring poverty on a global scale requires establishing a uniform poverty level across extremely divergent economies, which can result in only rough comparisons. The World Bank has defined the international poverty line as US $1 and $2 per day in 1993 purchasing power parity (PPP), which adjusts for differences in the prices of goods and services between countries. The $1 per day level is generally used for the least developed countries, primarily African, the $2 per day L. To overcome these bad habits, some reading clinics use a device called an accelerator, which moves a bar or curtain down the page at a predetermined speed. The bar is set at a slightly faster rate than the reader finds comfortable, in order to stretch him. The accelerator forces the reader to read fast, making word-by-word reading, regression and subvocalization, practically impossible. At first, comprehension is sacrificed for speed. But when you learn to read ideas and concepts, you will not only read faster, but your comprehension will improve. Many people have found their reading skill drastically improved after some training. For many people today, reading is no longer relaxation. To keep up their work, they must read letters, reports, trade publications, interoffice communications, not to mention newspapers and magazine, a never-ending flood of words. In getting a job or advancing in one, the ability to read and comprehend quickly can mean the difference between success and failure. Yet the unfortunate fact is that most of us are poor readers. Most of us develop poor reading habits at an early age and never get over them. The main deficiency lies in the actual stuff of language itself, words. Taken individually, words have little meaning until they are strung together into phrase, sentences, and paragraphs. Newspapers are sold at a price that fails to cover even a small fraction of the cost of production. The main source of income for most newspapers is commercial advertising. The success in selling advertising depends on a newspaper's value to advertisers. This is measured in terms of circulation. How many people read the newspaper? Circulation depends much on the work of the circulation department and on the services or entertainment offered in a newspaper's pages. But for the most part, circulation depends on a newspaper's value to readers as a source of information about the community, city, country, state, nation, and world, and even outer space. Newspapers have one basic purpose: to get the news as quickly as possible from its source, from those who make it to those who want to know it. Radio, telegraph, television, and other inventions brought competition for newspapers. So did the development of magazines and other means of communication. However, this competition merely spurred the newspapers on. They quickly made use of the newer and faster means of communication to improve the speed, and thus the efficiency of their own operations. Today more newspapers are printed and read than ever before. Competition also led newspapers to branch out to many other fields. Besides keeping readers informed of the latest news, today's newspapers educate and influence readers about politics and other important and serious matters.